I've heard that indifference is the opposite of love. I don't agree with that at the moment. For me, the true opposite of love is hate. Blind, burning hatred. I once loved my wife with every fiber of my being. I would do anything for her. But this is no longer the case. She broke my heart and ruined my happy life. Now it's my turn to destroy it. The house was dark when I carefully climbed the stairs, trying to remain unnoticed. Naturally, the two crooks in the room that used to be my bedroom and that I shared with my wife couldn't hear me, given all the noise they were making. I went to the bedroom door, which was only slightly ajar, and pushed it open with the 12-gauge pump-action shotgun I had with me. They were there. My future ex-wife Alice and my boss Jake Harmon. I finished the cartridge and saw how these two stopped and stared at me in surprise. Nothing attracts attention like the sound of a shot being fired into the chamber of a shotgun. Jake stood up. "What are you doing here, weakling?" he asked. "You should be in Jonesboro. Why are you here? Do you want to see what a real man should be like? Is that all?" Hearing this, Alice giggled. "Yes, baby, he wants to see how a real man works," she said. Jake laughed and took a step towards me. That's when it all started. I didn't say anything and pulled the trigger. It was unstoppable. At some point, I looked down and realized that my feet were almost drowned in a pile of used shotgun shells. Damn it, I thought. How many rounds are in this gun? I kept pulling the trigger. Eventually, when my anger subsided, I stopped shooting. There was a thick smell of gunpowder in the room, and smoke hung in the air like a thick curtain. I realized that my life was over. When the police arrive, they will most likely shoot me on the spot. If they hadn't done that, I probably would have faced the death penalty. No thanks. I checked and saw that I had one more cartridge left. I pulled the trigger for the last time in my life. I jolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat. Initially, my environment was unfamiliar, but recognition soon set in. I was staying at a Days Inn in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and had been there since Sunday. It was now the early hours of Thursday morning. I was assigned here by Jake to handle a customer upgrade. The task was completed on Wednesday, and I had finished all my paperwork before going to sleep. My plan was to drive home after checking out once the sun had risen. As the lingering traces of the nightmare faded from my mind, I took a deep breath and glanced at the clock. It read 3:30 a.m. Damn, I thought. Sleep would be impossible now. I got out of bed, splashed some water on my face, and brewed a cup of coffee. Turning on the television, I tried to steady my nerves. This wasn't the first nightmare I'd endured, and something told me it wouldn't be the last. For nearly a week, ever since I discovered Alice's betrayal, I had been plagued by similar dreams almost every night. Each one was largely the same, differing only in the weapon I wielded. I recall dreaming once that I was armed with a minigun, tearing apart their bodies with thousands of bullets. In another nightmare, I held a rocket-propelled grenade, obliterating them, and the entire bedroom, in an instant. There was also a dream where I used a nuclear device, annihilating half the county along with the two betrayers. Normally, I'm not a violent person. Despite spending 4 years in the Marine Corps, I never fired a weapon in anger. Sure, I own a few guns, including a 12-gauge shotgun. Everyone around here seems to have one or two. But I never contemplated using them against another person. That is, until recently. Curious about the change? Let me explain. My name is Thomas Jefferson Langley. With parents who adored history, I was given a name steeped in the past from birth. My sister, my only sibling, was named after Betsy Ross. Seriously. I enlisted in the Marines right after high school and became a nuclear, biological, and chemical defense specialist. Except for a one-year assignment in Okinawa, Japan, I spent the majority of my time in the United States, primarily working as an instructor. In the last 6 months of my military service, I was part of the team operating the gas chamber at my base. Early in my military career, I realized that my skills had limited applicability in the civilian sector, so I pursued higher education and earned a degree in networks and business. Completing my 2-year degree took 3 years, which led me to leave the military after 4 years and return to school using my benefits. After graduating, I secured a position as an account representative with Empire Tech Solutions, a nationwide IT company headquartered in my hometown in Missouri. I met Alice while conducting a survey for the local newspaper. She was an editor responsible for selecting the best photographs to accompany their articles. We started talking, began dating, fell in love, and eventually got married 5 years ago. The following 4.5 years were enjoyable. Alice and I got along smoothly and loved spending time together whenever possible. We were intimate several times each week and began discussing the idea of having children. Our income was quite good, so we purchased an old 4-bedroom farmhouse in the countryside, set on 4 acres. It required some renovations, but we both adored it. She appreciated its rustic charm, and I was fond of the separate workshop on the property. Additionally, we both valued that the master bedroom featured its own gas fireplace. There was also plenty of space for children. Then everything fell apart. For me, at least. My boss, Bill Michaels, retired, and the company started looking for his replacement. I saw this as a great opportunity, so I applied for the position. I didn't get the job, but John Carlson, who oversees the company's service operations nationwide, informed me that I was a serious contender. However, the board decided to hire someone else, Jake Harmon. I searched for Harmon on the company intranet and discovered that he was being relocated from Boston, where he worked as the senior account representative for the Northeast region. He had slightly more seniority than me, but not by much. Additionally, his uncle was a senior member of the board of directors. Naturally, he was chosen for the role. I looked at his photo and immediately disliked him. There was something about his crooked smile that just screamed, trouble. He joined the team and quickly became well known. The women in the office were instantly drawn to him like moths to a flame. He was a few inches taller than me and quite well built. When we first met, he greeted me with that crooked smile while shaking my hand. "At last, I get to meet my competitor," he remarked. "I hear you nearly secured my position. Don't worry, that won't affect our relationship." "I'm happy to hear that," I responded. He smiled and then left my office. There was something about him that really annoyed me, though I couldn't quite identify what it was. I mentioned it to Alice one evening after dinner. "Why don't you invite him over for dinner sometime?" she suggested. "Maybe it will help break the ice between you. Is he married?" I shook my head. "I don't think so," I replied. "I didn't see anything about that in his online profile." "Maybe he's just feeling a bit lonely," she said. "A single guy in a new town surrounded by unfamiliar faces. It must be difficult for him to adjust, especially after living in Boston." "Perhaps you're correct," I responded. The following day, I extended a dinner invitation to him, which he accepted with enthusiasm. "Feel free to bring your family if you'd like," I added. "There's no family," he replied. "It's just me. However, I'd be delighted to join you and your wife for dinner. I appreciate the invitation. Should I bring anything?" "Only bring your appetite," I assured him. "All right," he said. "I'll be there." He arrived punctually, and we enjoyed a pleasant evening overall. We had the opportunity to learn more about each other, and I felt we had built a bit of a connection. Alice went all out, preparing a pot roast with potatoes and vegetables, She even packed some leftovers in a Tupperware container for him to take home. "He doesn't seem like a bad person," Alice remarked after he left. "You both seem to get along well." "Yeah, I suppose," I replied, though lingering doubts were bothering me. "By the way, that pot roast was amazing. Let me help you with the dishes, and then I'll properly thank you upstairs," I added, giving her a playful tap on her backside. She laughed and gracefully moved into the dining area to start clearing up. The following day at work, Jake stopped by my office. "I just wanted to thank you for dinner last night," he said. "Your wife made an incredible pot roast." "You're welcome," I responded. "Alice is an excellent cook." He smiled and nodded, and I couldn't help but wonder what else was on his mind. "Listen, Tom, I need you to begin taking more trips out of town," he stated. "I understand my predecessor restricted your travel time, but I'm worried we might lose some business if we don't adopt a more proactive approach." "What exactly do you mean?" I asked. He was right. Bill had ensured that I limited my trips to no more than one every 2 weeks to protect my home life, something I truly valued about him. "I'm thinking maybe 1 trip per week," Jake suggested. "I know it might strain things with Alice, but I'll make sure you're adequately compensated for the extra time away from home." "When does this start?" I inquired. "Next week," he answered. Given that today was already Friday, there wasn't much notice. "In fact, I'd like you to go to St. Louis on Monday. Peters and Listrom are planning to upgrade some of their servers in preparation for tax season, and I want you to evaluate the situation and provide some recommendations. Normally, this would be handled remotely, but I'd like you to take a more hands-on approach this time." Peters and Listrom was an accounting firm we had worked with for years, and this was the first I had heard about any upgrades. "All right," I responded. "How much time are we looking at?" "This shouldn't take me more than a few hours at most." "You're forgetting they have satellite offices throughout the city," Jake replied. "You'll need to visit each one." Damn, I thought. That might take 2 or 3 days, possibly even 4. "Okay," I said. "I'll inform Alice. She's not going to be pleased." "I bet she'll forgive you once she sees your paycheck," Jake remarked before exiting my office. Alice was upset about me potentially being away for 4 days the following week, but I took her out for dinner and dancing that evening, and we spent much of the weekend together in bed. "When you've settled in, give me a call, and I expect to hear from you daily," she said as I packed my bags in the car. Luckily, St. Louis was close enough for me to drive there. "And make sure you behave yourself." "Am I not always?" I responded, before kissing her. Once I was settled in my room in St. Louis, I called her cell phone, and later that night after my first client meeting. I made sure to call the house phone every evening, and we had pleasant, lengthy conversations that always ended happily. It turned out I finished with the client early Thursday morning, so I drove home intending to surprise my wife. We had a wonderful reunion, and I felt everything was going to be fine. The subsequent few weeks were relatively smooth. During that period, I was only away for 1 night each time. However, things began to change afterward. My trips became longer, and over the next 4 weeks, I found myself away for 4 days at a stretch, with one journey extending to a full 5 days. Jake honored his commitment, and my paycheck saw a substantial increase, but that scarcely made up for the time I spent away from Alice. Initially, Alice appeared to manage the frequent absences well, but by the 4th week, it was evident they were starting to impact her. When I returned that week, I noticed what seemed to be the smell of cigarette smoke. Alice and I both smoked when we first met. After getting married, we decided to quit smoking together. It was challenging at first, but we eventually succeeded. We had been smoke-free for about 2 years when this situation began. I asked Alice if she had been smoking while I was away. "Yes," she replied. "I'm sorry, it's just so hard when you're not here." "I understand," I responded. "You know I have no choice. Jake is the one sending me out all over the place." "I understand," she said again. "I just don't like it, that's all. I wish you were home more often." "I do too," I agreed. "Maybe I'll talk to Jake and see if he can ease up a bit." I did discuss it with Jake, but he brushed me off, saying it was part of the job. He told me that if I wasn't happy, I could find another place to work. Being a responsible employee with bills to pay, I endured and continued working, though I did explore other opportunities. About a week after returning home from a trip, I was preparing for bed when Alice requested that I light the fireplace. We both liked having it on while being intimate, so I went to switch it on. That's when I realized the pilot light was out. I was puzzled by what could have caused it and couldn't keep it ignited. Consequently, I turned off the gas to the fireplace and mentally noted to call a technician. Due to my busy schedule, it took a couple of weeks to arrange for someone to inspect it. After performing his diagnostics, the technician looked up at me and shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Langley," he said, "but the regulator is beyond repair. It's likely been in use for at least 60 years. "Is it possible to replace it?" I inquired. He shook his head again. "Unfortunately not," he replied. "They stopped manufacturing those around 30 years ago. Honestly, I'm amazed it lasted this long without issues. You realize there was a real risk of a massive explosion here. If I were you, I'd replace the entire insert." "I'm not sure when I'll have the time to do that," I responded. "My schedule is pretty messed up." He gave me his business card. "When you find the time, come by and check out what we offer," he suggested. "We have units with remote controls and even ones you can operate via smartphone over the internet. In the meantime, keep the gas turned off to avoid any serious problems." "Thanks," I said, taking his card. Unfortunately, despite Alice's constant reminders, I never managed to replace the insert. Jake continued to assign me tasks, sometimes requiring me to work over the weekend. As a result, the atmosphere at home became very tense. Our intimacy relationship nearly vanished, and Alice began to be very short and irritable with me. I tried my best to stay calm, but it was challenging. As the business trips persisted, Alice's condition deteriorated further. Meanwhile, Jake seemed indifferent, continually assigning me to various clients. On several occasions when I tried calling the home phone, it went to voicemail, and Alice's mobile would directly reach her voicemail. When I confronted her about it, she merely presented excuses. "I'm sorry, but I chose to go out for drinks with the girls and didn't hear the phone ring," she would respond. Then, the worst imaginable event occurred. I wrapped up a site visit a day ahead of schedule and decided to surprise Alice by coming home early. However, the surprise was on me. When I drove into our driveway, I noticed Jake's BMW parked by our garage. I was puzzled about his presence. Stepping out, I touched the car's hood. It was warm, indicating he had only been there briefly. Entering the house, I found Alice on the couch with Jake. As I opened the door, she swiftly withdrew her hands. I also observed her attire, a short black dress that highlighted her legs and cleavage. The air in the house was thick with the scent of cigarette smoke. "Tom, you're back," she greeted, standing up. Jake also rose, a smirk playing on his lips. "Yes, it's a surprise," he remarked. "You were supposed to be away until tomorrow. What's going on?" "We completed the project a day early, so I thought I'd come home and spend some time with my wife," I replied. "What's happening here?" Jake was just taking me out to dinner, Alice explained. Jake smirked as I nodded. I understand, I said, turning to Jake. Well, I'm home now, so if anyone is taking Alice out, it'll be me, her husband. I think you should leave. And if I don't? He challenged. Then I'll have to kick you out of my house, I stated firmly. You might be my boss at work, but not here, in my home. He chuckled and glanced at Alice. I'll handle this, Alice intervened, addressing Jake. I think you should leave now. Jake remained silent for a moment before nodding and preparing to go. I'll be discussing this with John tomorrow, I added before Jake opened the door to exit. I doubt he'll approve of you interfering with an employee's wife. You better not mention anything to John, Jake warned. Don't forget my uncle is a senior board member. He could take your job and John's as well. And remember, you're supposed to be in Jonesboro on Sunday. Turning to Alice, he said, I'll talk to you later, before shutting the door. I then turned back to Alice. What the hell is going on here? I asked. Are you dating him behind my back? Alice was silent, shyly lowering her eyes. I got my answer. You, aren't you? How long has this been going on? It's been a while. Damn it, Tom, you're never around, she replied. Yes, because the jerk you're cheating on me with is constantly pushing me away, I retorted. Seriously, Alice, how could you be so stupid? You knew he was the one who wouldn't let me into town. You're certainly smart enough to understand what he's doing. How many times have you been in our bed with him? I do not know, she admitted. I wasn't watching. Absolutely wonderful, I remarked. Have you developed feelings for him? Somewhat, unfortunately, she replied. But I still love you. I just wish you were here. You understand what this means, don't you? I asked. What? She responded. It means I'll be filing for divorce as soon as possible, I stated. I can't continue to tolerate this situation. Please, Tom, don't, she begged. I don't want a divorce. So what? You think you can be with Jake when he pushes me away, and then turn to his inadequate replacements when I come home? I questioned. I've never given you any inadequate replacements, she countered. You haven't given me anything for months, I said. I did not fulfill my marital duty. Damn it, Alice, how could you be so selfish? So, what are your plans this time? What is it? She asked. Do you still want to take me out for dinner? Are you serious? I replied. I need to book a motel room for the night. There's no way I'm going to sleep in a bed anymore after you've been there with him, and I have nowhere else to stay. I refuse to sleep on the couch. Besides, there's a smell of cigarettes everywhere. By the way, do you allow him to smoke in the house? We both smoke in the house, she replied. I'm sorry. I stood up and looked at her before speaking, trying to contain my anger. Let me make one thing clear, I stated firmly. I'm going to secure a motel room for tonight. Tomorrow I'll come by while you're at work to collect some of my belongings. If you bring that jerk into my house again before the divorce is finalized, both of you will regret it deeply. Do you understand? Yes, Alice replied, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't help but wonder why she was crying since she was the one who had caused all the pain. I rushed upstairs to grab a suitcase and some clothes, noticing the ashtrays on both nightstands, each filled with ashes and cigarette butts. The room was thick with the smell of stale cigarette smoke and intimacy. I barely managed to keep from feeling sick. I packed enough items for a few days and went back downstairs to find Alice still on the couch. I'm leaving now, I declared. Here, I continued, removing my wedding ring and tossing it onto the table before her. I won't need this anymore. Remember what I said. Goodbye." I walked out of the house, got into my car, and drove away. I have no idea what she did after I left, and honestly, I didn't care. The only thing I know is that she didn't overwhelm me with calls or texts afterward. I found a motel that offered rooms with kitchenettes on a weekly basis and paid for 2 weeks in advance. I had a feeling I might need to stay longer and didn't want to risk losing the room when I returned from Jonesboro. After settling in, that night marked the beginning of my nightmares. The following day, I arrived at work slightly earlier than usual and submitted all my paperwork. Intentionally steering clear of Jake, I proceeded to meet with John Carlson, who was next in my supervisory hierarchy. "Tom, you're here ahead of schedule," he remarked. "How did everything turn out?" "It went smoothly, John," I responded. "I've already submitted my paperwork. Actually, I have a personal issue I need to address before heading to Jonesboro and was hoping to take the remainder of the day off." "Have you had a chance to talk to Jake yet?" he inquired. "Jake is actually part of the issue," I replied. He seemed taken aback. "Really?" he asked. "Would you like to discuss it?" I spent the next few minutes explaining what had happened the night before and what Alice had confided in me. "So, I need to gather some of my belongings and consult a divorce attorney today," I explained. "That's why I approached you instead of going directly to Jake." "I understand," John said. "Go ahead and handle what you need to. I'll manage things with Jake. And remember, if you ever need someone to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out to me." I expressed my gratitude and left the office. Luckily, I managed to avoid Jake. I made a quick stop at a coffee shop for breakfast while searching for a divorce lawyer on my smartphone. I found one and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. After finishing my breakfast, I glanced at the clock and realized that Alice had likely left for work. With that in mind, I headed to what used to be our home. I couldn't find her car anywhere, so I parked and went inside. The house still smelled strongly of cigarettes, though it was less intense than the night before. I made my way upstairs, gathered more of my belongings and carried them to my car. I then grabbed some trash bags, filled them as much as I could, and loaded them into the car as well. Realizing I would need a storage unit for all this stuff, I made a note to rent one that day. Next, I went into my workshop and took inventory of everything I had there. Naturally, I couldn't fit all of it in the car, so I knew I would have to return for the rest. While doing so, I came across something I had forgotten. I found a small round container with about 10 old CS training tablets, the kind I used in the gas chamber. For those who aren't familiar, CS, or 2-chlorobenzylidine malononitrile, is one of the most commonly used tear gases by police and military forces. Technically, it isn't a gas like hydrogen or oxygen. It consists of tiny particles that infiltrate almost everything: clothes, hair, eyes, you name it. We utilized these tablets to mimic a chemical assault during our gas chamber training sessions, and they proved to be highly effective. While I was in service, we typically used 1 or 2 of these tablets, placing them on a metal plate. Upon heating, the plate would cause the capsules to melt, thereby releasing the gas. Generally, 2 capsules were sufficient for a comprehensive gas chamber drill. Exposure to CS would cause an individual to feel a burning sensation on any exposed skin, irritation and tearing of the eyes, and a burning discomfort in the mucous membranes of the nose, mouth, and throat. This leads to coughing, significant nasal discharge, confusion, and breathing difficulties. Although it's an unpleasant experience, the effects dissipate relatively quickly after taking a shower. I used to organize spontaneous field training by secretly sprinkling some CS powder into ashtrays, typically when we were deployed. Since the chemical reacts with heat, anyone using the ashtray would effectively find themselves in their own miniature gas chamber. I had a mischievous idea and brought the capsules into the house. I opened a capsule and scattered the powder in one ashtray, then did the same with another. If Alice and Jake chose to enjoy a cigarette after intimacy, they would be in for an unexpected surprise. I thought this would discourage them from smoking in my home. I moved through the house, applying the same method to a few other used ashtrays I discovered. But I didn't stop there. I took a couple of capsules, opened them, and sprinkled the powder on the bottom sheet of the bed and the two pillows, before carefully putting the top sheet and bedspread back in place. I considered sprinkling some CS on the stove, but decided against it. I only had 4 capsules remaining and wanted to keep some for a potential return. I decided that what I had already done would be enough to cause some interruption of intimacy, at least for a while. The final task was to gather my firearms, my personal laptop, and our tax documents from the past 2 years, which the attorney requested to review. I secured the guns in my car's trunk, then locked up the house and departed. I made my way to a storage facility, rented a modest unit, and stored my belongings there until I could locate a new place to call home. After unloading my vehicle, I locked the storage unit and realized I had just enough time to grab a quick burger before my meeting with the lawyer. I reached the law office of Lisa Hawkins right on schedule and was escorted to her office. She listened attentively as I recounted my situation, taking notes throughout. She remained silent until I had finished speaking. "Well, Mr. Langley, that's quite a story," she remarked. "Do you see any possibility of salvaging your marriage?" "No, there's no way," I replied. "Understood," she responded. "To begin with, Missouri operates as a limited, no-fault state. However, you can mention her adultery, which might influence the division of marital assets. Since you don't have any children, child support won't be an issue. From the tax documents you provided, it appears your wife earns slightly less than you, but in my view, that's insufficient to justify any spousal support. What about the house? Do you wish to retain it?" "No," I answered. "I can't stay there anymore. She can keep it if she chooses." "Alternatively, you could sell the house and divide the proceeds, although I doubt there's much equity in it," she suggested. "I can recommend that you sell it and see how she responds." "That's okay," I replied. "Can I take legal action against Jake for his actions?" She shook her head. "Are you talking about a claim for alienation of affection?" she asked. I nodded. "Unfortunately, that's not an option in Missouri since around 2003. So you're saying he's your employer?" "Yes," I answered. "In that case, I recommend escalating the issue, perhaps by speaking with his supervisor or your company's HR department." "You work for Empire Tech, correct?" she inquired. "Yes," I confirmed. "Then you're in luck," she continued. "I know they have a strict policy against such behavior. Inform them about what's happening, and I'm sure they'll support you. If they don't, come back and we'll discuss further steps, okay?" "That sounds good," I said. "Thank you." "All right, I'll start the paperwork," she said. "Where would you like her to be served?" "At her workplace would be best," I responded. Lisa smiled at that. "Understood," she said. "Now avoid making any poor decisions. This also means no dating. The court won't look kindly on that. I also suggest you see a counselor." She handed me a business card. I recognized the name. Dr. Rose Carlson, John's wife. "Got it, thanks," I said. We finished the meeting, and I paid a retainer after she gave me a checklist of actions to help protect my finances. Since we only had one joint credit card with our bank, I canceled it, withdrew half of our funds, and opened a new account solely in my name. After that, I grabbed something to eat and returned to the motel. I didn't hear from Alice until later that night. When her number appeared on my smartphone, I recognized it and chose to answer the call. "You son of a bitch," she shouted. "What did you do to the house?" At that moment, I knew exactly what had occurred. "I have no idea what you're talking about," I responded dishonestly. "Yes, you do, you bastard," she replied. "You placed something in the ashtrays, and there's something in the bed." "You mean apart from you and Jake?" I questioned. "Damn it," she exclaimed. "Explain what you did. We can't even use the bedroom." "We?" I asked. The next voice belonged to my boss, and he was clearly upset. "God damn it, Tom. What did you do? The entire place feels like a damn gas chamber," he growled. "I'm going to kick your ass." "What are you doing in my bed with my wife, you son of a bitch?" I retorted. "If anyone deserves a beating, it's you." "You're going to pay for this, you bastard," he threatened. "I'll make sure to relay your pathetic threat to John and my lawyer," I replied. "Goodbye." I ended the call and began counting to 10. The phone rang again before I reached 7. I ignored the second call, letting it go to voicemail. I couldn't help but smile, reflecting on what had just transpired in the bedroom. Something told me they wouldn't be using that bed tonight. I slept quite well that night, aside from one nightmare where I imagined using a machine gun to eliminate the two cheaters. The next day I slept in and didn't get out of bed until around 10:30. I drove to an IHOP for a late breakfast and was surprised to find Alice sitting at my table. "What a surprise," I remarked. "How did you sleep last night?" "I think you already know how I slept last night," she replied. "I was passing by and saw your car, so I decided to stop in and see you." "What do you want, Alice?" I asked. "I'm just trying to enjoy a good breakfast." "I want to talk," she said. "About us." "There's no us anymore, Alice," I responded. "You made that happen when you chose to cheat on my boss." "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I was just feeling lonely." "And you think I wasn't?" I countered. "You knew very well I was gone because your fling sent me away. By the way, I met with a lawyer yesterday. She's preparing the divorce papers. You should be served sometime next week." "But I don't want a divorce," she whispered. "And I don't want a cheating partner as my wife," I told her. "Don't worry. I'm letting you keep the house unless you want to sell it. Either option works for me. Also, your credit card is no longer active." "I know," she said. "I found out this morning when I tried to pay for gas. I had to use cash. So tell me, what did you do to the house yesterday?" "I have no clue what you're referring to," I responded. "I just stopped by to retrieve some of my belongings, especially my firearms and my computer. So, what exactly transpired?" She replied, "Jake and I were having a cigarette in the bedroom before heading to bed. I know you dislike smoking inside the house, but we assumed you wouldn't be back, so it wouldn't matter. Immediately after extinguishing our cigarettes, we both began to experience a burning feeling. We started coughing and mucus was dripping from our noses. I suspected you had interfered with something, but I wasn't sure what. I said, 'I guess smoking in the bedroom is off the table now.' So, what did you do next? Did you go to Jake's place?" "Yes, we stayed overnight at his apartment," she answered. "Nothing significant happened, though." Neither of us were up for it by that point. "It's just too damn bad," I remarked sarcastically. "So, what's your plan now?" "I'm going to return to the house to ventilate and clean up the bedroom," she stated. "Look, I understand that things are finished between us, but I was hoping we could at least part ways amicably as friends." I couldn't believe her audacity. I placed my fork down and stared at her before responding. "Friends?" I asked. "You have committed the worst possible betrayal that a woman can commit toward someone she claims to love. You destroyed my trust and broke my heart by cheating on me with my boss, in my house, and in my bed. And you have the nerve to ask if we can stay friends? Let me tell you something. Right now, I'm gathering all my strength so as not to harm you." Her eyes widened and her face paled. "Don't you have any feelings for me at all?" "What is it?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," I replied. "Once I loved you with all my heart. Not anymore. As much as I once loved you, I hate you just as much now." "Do you hate me?" she sobbed. "With every fiber of my being," I replied. "And you better warn Jake that if he starts contradicting me, he's going to get hurt." Alice recoiled from my words. She had never seen me like this before. She grabbed her purse and stood up. "Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish my breakfast in peace. I'm sick of the sight of you right now." I'm sorry, Tom," she sobbed before turning around and walking away. I watched her get into the car and drive away. Good riddance, I thought to myself. I couldn't help but smile, knowing that they hadn't come across the powder that I had scattered on the bed. I spent the rest of the day, in fact, without any significant activities. I drove around the neighborhood, took a walk in the park, and eventually found myself watching a game at a bar, sipping a beer. I wanted to go back to the house to get some more of my things, but I changed my mind, not knowing how I would cope being with Alice. Later, I returned to the motel and packed my things for the trip to Jonesboro. One day on Tuesday, Alice called me after she was handed the divorce papers at her workplace. She was visibly upset and humiliated when the receptionist informed her that the divorce papers had been filed because of her infidelity. "How could you embarrass me like that, Mom?" "What is it?" she asked. "How could you embarrass me by cheating on me with my boss?" I replied angrily and hung up the phone. I also received a threatening email from Jake, which I forwarded to John. John replied, assuring me that there was no need to worry about Jake. "If everything goes smoothly, he should be gone by the end of the week," John said. I thought, great, he can take this a girl of easy virtue with him. Now I'm getting ready to leave. In a way, it's probably for the best that I wasn't in the city, where I've been talking to the wrong people for the last few days. You never know how it would have ended. Looking at my watch, I saw that it was almost 5 o'clock in the morning, so I decided to take a shower, have breakfast, and go outside. On Thursday, around 6:30, I was driving home with a considerable distance ahead, so I took the chance to relax. As I neared my hometown, I switched on my favorite local radio station, hoping to catch the morning news. The announcer reported, "At least one person has been confirmed dead, and another is in critical condition after firefighters responded to an incident on Old Mill Road." Old Mill Road. That's where my house is located, I thought. I turned up the volume to listen more closely. An explosion demolished the second story of an old farmhouse on Old Mill Road, late Wednesday night. The announcer continued. Firefighters arrived but couldn't control the fire. 2 individuals were rescued from the house, with one pronounced dead at the scene. The cause of the fire is still unknown. Feeling uneasy, I decided to visit the house to ensure everything was all right. When I arrived, I was stunned by the sight. The house was completely destroyed, leaving only smoking remnants and the brick fireplace. I noticed 2 vehicles near the shop. One belonged to Alice and the other seemed to be Jake's. The workshop where I kept all my tools appeared untouched. As I pulled into the driveway, a couple of firefighters approached me. "I'm sorry, sir, but you'll need to leave," one of them said. I showed them my license. "This is my home," I responded. "I've been in Jonesboro since Sunday." "What happened?" "A late-night explosion was reported," the firefighter explained. "We sent crews as quickly as possible, but it was already too late." "I heard on the radio that 2 people were rescued," I said. "My wife was here last night. What happened to her?" "Well, sir," the firefighter replied, "a woman was pulled from the house with serious injuries and was taken to the burn center at the local hospital. I don't have information on her identity or her current condition." "And the other person?" I asked. The firefighter looked down before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, sir, he didn't survive," he said. I nodded in acknowledgement. "What led to this?" I inquired, indicating the remnants of the house. The firefighter examined the smoldering debris and shook his head. "We're not sure yet," he responded. "The investigation is still ongoing. It might be a good idea to contact your insurance company." I nodded and left the scene. Once at my motel, I called John to share the news. "I'm sorry to hear that, Tom," he said. "By the way, the board decided to end Jake's employment yesterday. He was set to be fired today. Maybe you should visit Alice at the hospital and take the rest of the day off." "Thanks," I replied. "I'll see you tomorrow." I made my way to the hospital and found the ward where Alice was admitted. I briefly spoke with the nurse on duty and provided my insurance information. That's when I learned that Alice had sustained 2nd- and 3rd-degree burns over more than half of her body. "She's lucky to be alive," the nurse remarked. "Can I visit her?" I asked. "Not right now," the nurse replied. "She's on antibiotics and has been sedated. The doctor says she'll likely need skin grafts." "Inform me when I can visit her," I requested, handing the nurse my mobile number. Returning to my room, I broke down in tears. Don't ask me why. Perhaps it was the sorrow for the years I had shared with Alice. But I'm unsure. What I do know is that most of the animosity I harbored towards her had dissipated. Before she became involved with Jake, she was the love of my life. I accessed the internet and submitted a claim to my insurance provider. According to their website, I would receive their response within 30 days. That night marked the first time I slept without being haunted by my nightmare. In the following days, I verified that Jake had perished in the initial explosion. John also informed me that Jake's position was now available to me, should I choose to accept it. What the hell, I thought. I decided to take the job, as it offered a higher salary and required minimal travel. I spent a few days searching for a suitable apartment and eventually found one. After moving in and settling down, I spent the weekend retrieving my tools from the old workshop. While there, I walked through the remnants of our house, searching for anything salvageable. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything useful. A few days later, I received a call from the hospital, informing me that I could see and speak with Alice. Entering her room, I observed her, most of her body wrapped in bandages. Approaching the side of her bed, I looked down at her. She glanced up at me with one eye, tears streaming down her face. "Can you speak?" I inquired. She gave a slight nod and mouthed, "Yes." "What happened?" "We went out on Wednesday night," she replied. "When we returned, I asked Jake to light the fireplace in the bedroom. He ignited it on Monday, and we used it for 2 nights without any issues." "What?" I responded, shocked. "Don't you recall I instructed you to keep the gas to that unit turned off until the insert was replaced? What were you thinking?" "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Continue," I encouraged. She explained. Jake noticed the pilot was out, so he checked whether the gas was on. Then he struck a match to ignite the pilot, and that's when it all went wrong. I heard a loud explosion, and the next thing I remember, I woke up here." I responded, "That's why I turned off the gas to that device. I warned you it was too dangerous to activate." She replied, "I suppose I forgot." I continued, "Now Jake is dead." Tears streamed down her face. "And the house is completely destroyed, just like our marriage." She asked, "I really messed everything up, didn't I?" "Yes, you did," I confirmed. "So what happens next?" she inquired. I said, "They told me you might need skin grafts. It's going to be very expensive. I'm not sure if your insurance will cover it." "What about us?" she asked. I replied, "As I mentioned, there is no longer an us. You ruined that too." "The divorce process will continue," I added as she sobbed. "But I'll keep you on my insurance until you get through this." "Thank you for that," she said. "Do you still hate me?" "Not as much as before," I answered, "but I still don't like you very much." "I understand, Tom," she said. "Anyway, I'll leave you alone for now," I said. "I just hope you've learned your lesson." "What's that?" she asked. "If you play with fire, you're going to get burned," I said before walking out of the room. To my astonishment, the insurance company honored my claim, and I received a check for the house damage. After settling the mortgage, there wasn't much remaining, and I had no plans to rebuild. Consequently, I discussed with Alice, and we decided to sell the property and divide the profits. Alice stayed in the hospital for an extended period. The paperwork granted her a prolonged paid leave while she recovered. The divorce proceeded as my lawyer had anticipated, and within 60 days, I was single again. During this time, I began dating Rose, who was remarkably effective in helping me manage my anger issues. I honored my promise to Alice by keeping her on my insurance until she was well enough to live independently. The doctors did an excellent job with her treatment, and the skin grafts healed successfully. Although she wasn't as beautiful as she was when we got married, she still looked lovely despite her scars. As a final act of kindness, I assisted her in moving into a new apartment. Once the furniture was set up, I handed her the keys. "I hope you like it," I said. "I made sure to choose one without a fireplace." She laughed as she took the keys. "Thank you, Tom," she replied, tears welling up in her eyes. "I appreciate it. You're a good man, Tom, and you deserve a wonderful woman. I'm sorry I ruined everything for us." I nodded in response. "Yeah, well, I suppose that's how things go," I said, giving her a final hug. "Take care of yourself." "I will," she responded before I left. I wondered what was next for me. I took out my phone and browsed through my contacts, surprised by how many women had given me their numbers recently. I found the one I wanted and made the call. "Hello?" a female voice answered. "Yeah, this is Tom," I said. "Are you busy tonight?" "I was until you called," Nancy replied. I had met Nancy a few weeks ago at a local club. She had the most striking blue eyes and endless energy. "Do you want some more of my lasagna?" she offered. "You know I do," I responded. "Then come on over," she said. "I'll heat it up for you." "I'm on my way," I said, ending the call. Sometimes a little excitement is exactly what I need.